All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gather around the Spotify from Sonos, gather around the wherever you guys are, the TV speaker, the Bose, the JBL. We have an awesome podcast recording for you guys today. You guys know me. I'm your co-host, Bryce. Not joined by my good buddy across the country, Brendan, today. He got pulled in a couple different directions. So I'm taking on solo, and we've got a duo guest appearance today. We've got Josh Cincinnati, who's working over at the Interchain Foundation, and Barry Plunkett is joining us, who's the founder of Interchain Labs. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
Great. It's great to be here. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, lovely to be here. Thanks for having us, Bryce.
Yeah, you bet. No, at the Crypto 101 podcast, we always like to get to know who we're speaking to first. Like to get acquainted. Then we like to get into the business part. But so, Josh, give us a quick background. Who are you, and what's the kind of sort of work that you're doing at the foundation? And Barry, then we'll get to you a little bit about your background, and then up to speed of what we're working on here at the labs.
Sure. Yeah. So as succinctly as I can manage it, I got into the industry back in as a hobbyist in 2012. I was working at a startup at the time. Hired a developer who happened to be early on in the Bitcoin talk forums. And he basically, even though I hired him, he became a mentor to me. And I got obsessed with Bitcoin. I had kind of the perfect background to be obsessed with it: politics, math, hobbyist programmer. That was it for me. I was just sold, totally sold. And so I knew I had to get into the industry. So in 2015, I joined a Bitcoin and then Ethereum API company called BlockCypher. Was there as a developer advocate for 2 years, and learned in that process that, I love Bitcoin, love Ethereum, but they have fundamental privacy issues that I didn't understand at the time, and that got me interested in Zcash. So I moved over to Zcash, became executive director, the founding executive director of the Zcash Foundation. Learned a lot about managing cryptocurrency nonprofits, board interactions, and also angry communities at times.
I was just going to say that.
So I've had a lot of experience with that now. But I will say I learned a great deal, and I left that and right around when the pandemic started, and started focusing more on board work and advisory work for protocols and projects. And I'd always been somewhat intrigued by the Cosmos ecosystem, because to me, especially as an early Bitcoiner, it reminded me a great deal of what Bitcoin was like in the early days. Of a lot of the vision is very similar. This idea of empowerment, kind of being able to have an asymmetric relationship with the powerful and in your own sovereign way. A lot of that was really meaningful to me, and it resonated a great deal. So I ended up joining the Interchain Foundation, which is one of the primary supporting partners of the Cosmos ecosystem. Had a whirlwind year, but I can happily say that one of the end results of that work was being fortunate enough to be a part of acquiring Skip to become the Interchain Labs. And I think that's a great segue over to Barry.
Man, you must have done podcast or two before. That's a great segue.
Thanks.
I'll be quite brief. My background isn't as interesting as Josh's. I was working at a hedge fund called D. Shaw back in 2020 on a team where, and the whole mission of the team was, hey, let's watch emerging technologies and let's look at the tech we're building internally at the firm and let's spin out new startups. So I helped them spin out and scale like a developer tools startup, something in real estate tech, and obviously while I was there, DeFi Summer started happening, and I thought it was really, really cool, and I thought, hey, maybe we could make a lot of money here potentially if we could go and work on it. And crypto also just appealed to me because my background before that was in public policy, and I originally got out of that and got into tech and got into startups because I was like, I thought, oh, you could change the world with government, and I realized that's really, really hard to do, and maybe you can't, but you can change the world with tech. And the thing that I was missing from it was like, actually, how can we build systems that organize the way people interact and potentially change institutions? And so when I saw crypto, I was like, oh, holy shit, here's something that is potentially super, super lucrative and can have a really massive positive impact on the world. And then the fund I was at the time basically said, hey, we know you think this stuff is cool, but we can't touch it with a 10-foot pole for legal and compliance reasons. We won't go anywhere near it. So if you want to work on it, like you've got to do it on your own. We won't even spin anything off that touches it. So I left and then very quickly found my way into the Cosmos ecosystem.
That's awesome. You sold yourself short there at the beginning about not having a cool startup story, but being in Skunkworks at DE Shaw is pretty badass, I would say.
They started the team because when Jeff Bezos left to found Amazon, they didn't invest in it. So they were left holding the biggest bag in the world.
So bad. They were short.
So I was cope, basically. I was cope for Jeff Bezos.
That's awesome. You guys got both incredible backgrounds, but quite diverse. And Josh, I'll start with you on the foundation side. Kind of like walk us through the mission of the foundation and really like why you exist.
Yeah, it's a great
the same
question.
Then will be posed to Barry on the lab side, so you could warm up here.
Yeah. Well, I think you'll find there's a degree of alignment now post acquisition for sure. But the main reason we exist is we believe that these technologies that are being developed, all these cryptocurrencies that are being developed right now, that developers everywhere have a right to have more say in how they want to develop and build these things, and have sovereignty and choice, and to be able to do that while still being able to interact with other ecosystems, other people that are participating in these systems. So being able to, say, define your own economic system, but not be forced to settle onto one chain or the other. Because that's currently, and this is not to cast, shade on any particular approach, but just that, if you're building like an L2 on Ethereum, or if you're building an app atop Ethereum, you're effectively tying yourself to whatever that economic system is, right? And ultimately, those economic systems can change on you. And
so basically, you guys are looking for like a polyamorous society, whereas EVM is like a monogamous society.
See, that is a way better explanation. This is why you're the podcast expert. I just guessed, because I don't think I would have come up with that. But no, that is. I think there's something to be said about being open-minded, about having the opportunity to make those kinds of choices. And I think that in the case of the Interchain Foundation, it was founded on this precept that like we need to be able to build tools and systems to enable developers to do this. And one of the refocusing elements of that now, especially upon acquiring Skip and Interchain Labs, is that we believe that the Cosmos Hub needs to be a central part of that story, while still giving people opportunity and choice to build those systems and to provide tooling for people to do that. So that might have been a long-winded answer, but that's.
No, I like it. I like it.
Yeah, I can give some color on the lab side, but just starting big picture, to put what Josh said a different way. Most sort of big infrastructure projects in crypto start out with the goal of saying, "Hey, we're gonna build a blockchain, and then we're gonna try to get everybody to use that blockchain." But that's what we're doing here. Like, we're here to build a blockchain.
We're gonna raise $1 billion.
Yeah, we're gonna raise a ton of money. Everybody's gonna build on our blockchain. So Ethereum, Solana, Celestia, whoever, right? That's their approach. And when Cosmos got started back in 2017 or 2018, they took a different approach, which is they said, hey, we're going to build an internet of blockchains. And when you do that, when you start with the idea of saying we're going to build an internet instead of we're going to build a website, right? Your approach is incredibly different. You start from the perspective of what are the standards that we need, right, to do that? How does the internet work under the hood? the only way we can navigate between websites and share data across websites or have users log into websites are TCP/IP and HTTP, truly neutral protocols that don't have tokens or fees attached to them. They're truly neutral, and they're supported and used everywhere now, and that's what made the internet possible. But back in the day, there were a lot of people with commercial versions of these things. I mean, Apple had its own version of the internet that you could log on to only if you had the right device that you could plug into your Apple computer, right?
It's crazy. There were probably so many people that were like betting that was going to be the future.
Right.
I think I was I think it was eWorld was the one of the services. I'm that old, so I remember that.
Yeah, exactly. And that didn't work. What worked is neutral, open standards and tools, right? You say, okay, rather than if there's going to be an internet of blockchains, I can't just build one blockchain. I have to build a toolkit for that enables other people to build their own chains. And that toolkit has to have the same principles that those standards do. They have to be open source. It has to be neutral, and it has to be deeply flexible, right? You have to be able to customize what your chain does, how it interacts with the world, how decentralized is it, what are the things you want about it, right? And the purpose of Interchain Labs is to build the products and build that toolkit and support those protocols that bring that internet of blockchains into the world, that make it possible, and to do it in a neutral way. At the heart of it, a part of the internet of blockchains that we focus on specifically is also the Cosmos Hub, right? Okay. Which is built with this whole toolkit for people to launch their own blockchains that incorporates all of the standards for them to be able to interact with and interoperate with other blockchains in standardized ways that everybody can trust and rely on, that can be open. And we want to use the Cosmos Hub to help grow that internet of blockchains as well, right? But that is really the key difference, right? Where everyone else are saying like, hey, you have to build on our thing. We're saying, hey, just build in the internet, and you can use our tools to do that. And if you want to have a relationship with the Cosmos Hub, you can, right? But you don't have to. And that's, I think, really what defines Cosmos. And our role is just the product builders in that, trying to bring people into the ecosystem, trying to give them the tools that they need.
Awesome. So yeah, I think a lot of people are probably familiar with Ethereum and like interacting with MetaMask, right? That's kind of like the number one way I think a lot of people kind of get it. And so Ethereum could kind of be compared to Cosmos, and all the other like apps, call it like Aave, could kind of be compared to, or let's use Uniswap, which is built on Ethereum, could kind of be compared to like Osmosis, which is built on Cosmos. But what you're kind of telling me is that whereas Aave isn't its own blockchain, it's just kind of like an application built on this platform, you have Cosmos, which is more of like a network and that enables different, sort of layer ones to be built on it. Could you just kind of talk a little bit about that technical architecture, but just like boil it down to like why it would be relevant for like the average Joe to maybe know, or maybe it's not relevant to know? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think the hope is it wouldn't be relevant, right?
Okay.
For the average Joe to know. Like, you don't really care about the back end infrastructure of the different websites that you use.
It's all about the application, the use case.
Right. The thing that you care about is this a world-class application, right? Are we using good streaming software right now, or is my bank reliably showing my true balance or not? And like, is it easy for me to log in? Can I use my email address to log into all these different things? Like, you want a certain level of data and security and access interoperability across different sites, but you don't really care like how it's built in the back end. And that's really where we want to go for the Cosmos ecosystem, is that people can use the tech stack, and the benefits for developers are you can build really big, you can customize super deeply, you have all of the power of choice. But from a user's perspective, it's just like, oh, I'm interacting with all these great applications and it just works. So
it's really like a developer preference that you guys are built there for.
Yeah, and for users, what we want is it just works, and you don't have to worry about it, right? So there are a bunch of Cosmos chains that sort of similar to Ethereum. You just use MetaMask to sign in or to sign transactions. There are a bunch of Cosmos chains where you can use Phantom, right, your Solana wallet, to sign in and use it. There's also Cosmos chains that have sort of Cosmos-specific wallets. I think where we want to go is a future where any of these chains. You can use any wallet you want, and sort of the layer that we operate at is building the tools that make it super easy for a developer to do that. But we want, Robinhood to be able to come in and build a Cosmos blockchain and not worry about, what wallet is a user going to have to use. It's just like, no, I can log into my email, and with Cosmos, we can actually make that on chain, right? It doesn't have to be this weird off chain process. So that's
and actually on that point, Josh, I want to get to you, but on that point real quick was, I hear a lot of people talk about like how cumbersome it is to develop with EVM and stuff. Is developing with Cosmos like more Web 2 developer friendly? So kind of anybody could come in with their sort of computer science level of training or whatever and like develop on Cosmos easier than having to go learn Solidity?
It's a great question. There's a bunch of different. The thing that's nice about Cosmos is a bunch of different ways, right? So you want to use Solidity, you can use Solidity on a Cosmos blockchain. If you want to use a different language like Go or Rust or whatever, you can do that too. So from that perspective, it can be a lot more accessible for people, but also it can be accessible for folks who know how to develop crypto smart contracts somewhere else. One of the big things we're working on, for example, on the lab side, is a partnership with Solana, so people can write Solana smart contracts on Cosmos blockchains. So it's all about that ease for users and choice for developers.
Awesome. Yeah, Josh.
Yeah, and I mean, on that choice for developers side, something that I go back to, Barry's right that users shouldn't care about what these apps are built on. They should just use the app, just like they don't care that, when they log into their favorite website, if it's running AWS or Google Cloud, who cares, right?
That's a good point.
Right. But something that's interesting is the developers do care. Developers building these things care. And what you find time and time again, especially when looking at these applications that have been on chain for quite some time, on Ethereum or Solana, is that many of the developers behind the people that are building against them are finding that they are constrained by the environments that they're in that dictate that they have to live on that chain. And you see this happen time and time again, where they start to migrate to try and build within, take things off of that platform to their own, because it affords them more customization, more ability. It makes their users happier, right? And that, it's not a common story yet, but it is a story that is becoming more common. And in a way, to me and to a lot of people that have seen this happening time and time again in other ecosystems, it is just further validation that this sort of internet of blockchains, this Cosmos vision, is what is actually bearing out to be probably the final state for a lot of these applications, whether they are built initially on Ethereum or Solana or elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. And no, I mean, I definitely actually kind of want to stay on the application stuff, because I think that's where a lot of the meat is. We've seen a lot of different applications like in DeFi and DePIN and gaming arise throughout crypto. Is there any like specialization that Cosmos is uniquely fitted for, or that you guys, maybe more important question is, where do you guys actually see developers adopting Cosmos for like where are they really focused on?
Yeah, it's a great question. The reality is there's a ton of developers building Cosmos applications across basically any vertical you can think of. So, just in the past 6 months or so, there's been a lot of new AI chains that are emerging. So decentralized platforms for AI training, like Akash and Kudos and the Artificial Superintelligence Alliance, all built with Cosmos.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, I've heard of the ASI. That was really
the
cool.
ASI thing is a Cosmos chain, right?
Oh,
so
wow.
There's a newer generation too of chains that are more focused on creating economies for training data, right? So giving users sort of value back for the data that they're putting in to train LLMs based on actually where those LLMs are being used, by trying to trace that value all the way back to the data. There's a bunch of cool stuff there in Cosmos, Allura, 10 Planet, a handful of others that have raised 15, 25 million plus dollars from different venture firms and are pre-launch still. That's sort of been recent, but if you look over the history of the Cosmos ecosystem, just basically any meaningful vertical that you can think of in crypto has big traction. Another big one recently too is Bitcoin and Bitcoin L2s. So Babylon, which is the Bitcoin staking protocol that's going to be launching in the next few months, has $10 billion of Bitcoin staked, or some insanely large number. That's a Cosmos chain, right? There's a bunch of Bitcoin L2s that are built as Cosmos chains. So many things that you may interact with. Barachain, is built as a Cosmos chain. So it is really sort of like living up to this goal of saying, hey, we want to build the internet of blockchains. So the tech should be used in a ton of different places by a ton of different people that have different goals. But one of the things you'll notice about a lot of these is they're insanely ambitious. There's like usually like a bad fit for Cosmos is like, oh, I just want to like another copy paste DEX. Like you're not going to go through the trouble of building your own chain. You don't need to do that. You're going to deploy that somewhere else. So like we fortunately don't see a lot of that kind of stuff. It's all this kind of really big out there stuff.
Awesome. And Josh, kind of from, this question is probably something that's in the back of the mind of anybody who's maybe seen Cosmos over the years. There's been, while maybe a lot of adoption and development and cool stuff going on, a very low price or a sideways price. And I know we're not going to ask you about price predictions or anything like that, but you mentioned at the outset that you've dealt with and interfaced with angry communities. And I'm just curious about the impact that this price has had on the psychology of your community, and is there any sort of like things that the community is doing to maybe address not the price but maybe the inflation rate or any sort of the metrics that go into the valuation of the whole like sort of network, and how are you guys thinking about that?
Yeah, that's right. And to be honest, just transparently, I may be the wrong person to ask about that, because I'm not as on the boots on the ground on the community side. But I can tell you about what I've seen broadly in the past and what I know to be true. And I think it's actually honestly, obviously, people get upset when the price doesn't go the way that they want, and there's nothing that we can really do about that. It is a market. It's an open market, and there are lots of different assets out there that use Cosmos technology. So it's not like that anything that's on the Interchain Foundation side has an impact that way. But what I will say, more broadly, is I think people get excited about technology that can demonstrate something meaningfully different in the world, right? And what you really see when you see communities getting excited about things, and I saw this, early on in privacy projects in particular, right? When you go back to like the early days of Zcash, people knew that Bitcoin had fundamental privacy flaws. And what got people excited is that Zcash demonstrated a way to fix those problems in a way that was palpable and real. And it's that kind of activity that you actually do see across the board in all these various Cosmos chains that people get excited about. The issue that we have, I think, more fundamentally, is because of how open it is and how customizable it is. There isn't really a what you might call like a center of mass, or some kind of like shelling point around community discussion, because there's so many different places that are leveraging this tech, and sometimes in ways that are somewhat hidden, like the fact that Binance Chain is powered by a Cosmos tech, but nobody really knows or cares, right? And so it's that kind of issue that I think is sort of fundamental to that angst, is that you don't see that in a more cohesive way, the way that you'd see it where, oh, look at these 5 or 6 apps that are built atop Solana or Ethereum, because you can just say built on Solana, built on Ethereum, and they're very clearly integrated into those ecosystems. That's the fundamental challenge with a technology that is as permissive and interoperable as the one that we're supporting.
It reminds me of a quote from a guy who Barry mentioned, Jeff Bezos, in like 2000, 2001. The stock price was going down, and he goes, "It's crazy. It's surreal. I just watch our internals keep going up and to the right. The metrics improving, and our stock price keep going down and down and down." and he was like reflecting on that and just like, like we kept building and like, the market does what it does. You can't control the market. What you can control is building the best tech, ushering in the best community, all those sort of things that you can control, but you just can't control the price, right? There's so many things. And so that's my word of wisdom. I'm a Cosmos holder. I've been a Cosmos holder for a long time, and just want to encourage the community to follow the tech, and that over time, typically the fundamentals will get you in a good place. And so don't be too discouraged, because I think there's a lot of really incredible mind share going on. Now, the one thing that I haven't seen any mind share discussion on Cosmos is meme coins. So I got to ask, because love them or hate them, our community has asked a lot about them, and we've gotten requests to do more meme coin stuff. And so I've reluctantly last year, summertime, got into them, discovered them a little bit, made a couple, 10Xs. I was like, okay, I get why people are excited about this, but all that's on Solana, right? And so I'm just curious, is there any meme coin trenches that the Crypto 101 listeners should be sludging through in Cosmos yet? Or maybe plans to?
There are a few. They're in different places. It hasn't been as big in Cosmos as it's been in Solana. I mean, I don't think it's been as big anywhere as it's been in Solana. There's one chain, one Cosmos chain that is just like, there's two that are, or maybe more that are meme coin chains, but there's one recently that's been getting a lot of traction. But to be honest, it's like super deep fried, and I do not really fucking understand it. But the website is unicorn.meme. So pull it up, and you'll realize like why I have no idea what the fuck is going on. They do have a token here. I have never been able to figure out how to buy the token.
I like the lore. They
have a super, super active community on Twitter, and they're constantly blowing up shit in different places.
That's so funny.
One of the things that's weird about them is, so Cosmos is all built, one of these standards is a standard to connect all of these blockchains. So you can very easily bridge. You don't have to have an external bridge. You don't have to worry about, layer 0 or wormhole, any of this stuff. It just works. And the Unicorn people turn that off. So I don't know how you're supposed to, even if you can buy it, I don't know where you're supposed to take it or what you're supposed to do with it. But this is big.
That is kind of like the ultimate nihilistic expression of
like insanely deep fried. It's like way too deep fried.
I'm like, I'm going to maybe saying something polarizing for some of the viewers, but like, I'm not the biggest fan of them, and I guess partially because I've seen various phases of this in my long and not quite so storied, but certainly witnessed a lot of them in my career, and
yeah, you've seen the downside probably.
I've seen the downside. I've seen how it just ruins, and it is to me like, it's a fun lottery game for a lot of people, but it's a lottery game where most of the time you are on the outside looking in, and you're going to get hurt by it. I mean, that's my take on it. But I understand that people like to have fun, for sure, and I don't want to dispel that. But I will say that like I'm in it for the enduring like technological change that we can bring about, and I think that that's still. Meme coins are another expression of that, sure, but like there's so much more that we can do, and I'm excited about that part.
And it does bring to mind, I was listening to a podcast the other day with the founder of Barachain, and so that's an interesting one, because it did seem like there was so much mimetic, jokey sort of inside sort of language speak there, with like everything that they're building. I didn't catch that it was built on Cosmos, so I probably shouldn't have been distracted or whatever listening to that. But so with Barachain, what is that? Because like I couldn't really tell. Is it just like a competitor to Ethereum or whatever? It's its own layer 1, but they also have memes.
Yeah. Basically, I mean, they are just a EVM blockchain. So anything you can do on a normal EVM blockchain on Ethereum or wherever you can do there. They have the bear thing, and then they have used Cosmos to build a new kind of security mechanism that it's called proof of liquidity. I don't fully understand it, but the upshot is, when you have a blockchain, you need to secure it, and usually that requires assets and staking them. And in Berachain, there's some way by which the staked assets with the proof of liquidity mechanism can be used in DeFi as well, effectively. So it connects the applications and the chain more closely and leads to higher liquidity, I think, is the idea. No idea if that happens in practice. I know the team, I think they're great, but we don't work super, super closely with them. But just another example of a Cosmos chain, and that's the kind of creative thing that you can do with Cosmos that's much, much harder to do with other platforms, or impossible usually.
Yeah, no, that sounds like it just gives you a lot of blue sky in order to create whatever you want. That has sort of the security assurances and the decentralization of the infrastructure that Cosmos kind of provides. Berachain, the way you described it just kind of made me think it's like basically a blockchain with liquid staking built into it at the base layer.
Yeah, that might be a reasonable way to think about it. It's on. They've got 3 tokens. It's way too complicated for me. Investigate at your own risk. But the bear thing is a great meme online, right?
It's meme.
So.
No, that's interesting. Well, so what else in the future here? I would say in the next 6 months here, we're kind of in the middle of what I think is a bull market. I think there's going to be still a lot of excitement. I still think there's a lot of new imaginative things that the market's going to come up with. We just had the AI agent craze. That was that captured the imagination of the speculation in the sort of public, and things went up 10x, 20x, 30x in a couple months. And so not necessarily asking what's going to be the next thing to blow up that big, but what are you guys excited for where you're seeing you guys are on the bleeding edge of tech? What are you guys looking forward to? And then we'll get to our closing question after that.
Yeah. So in terms of the bleeding edge of tech, I think one of the things that we're most excited about is really these kinds of crypto applications starting to just feel like web applications. This is really a big part of what Cosmos is all about, is not there's so many horrible experiences that you have if you're actually trying to interact with blockchains today. You need to set up your wallet, you need to bridge between different blockchains, especially now where everyone's launching their own blockchain. You need to be able to manage gas across a bunch of different chains. You sort of need a Sherpa for everything that you
Luckily,
want.
Crypto 101 has sold guides to pretty much each of those questions that you have.
Right. So you guys are an excellent Sherpa, but if we want to get to the next wave, right, which we really think is possible now, where we can build these kinds of decentralized communities and protocols that put users more in control, and those can become parts of people's daily lives, then it can't feel like another internet. It has to feel like the same internet. And there's a lot of really cool technologies that we're working on, that we've seen other teams working on, that are improving interop, that are improving signing, that are hiding wallets, that are just starting to make it all just feel like, oh, I'm just doing something online. And once we have that, then I think it opens up a whole world of people moving to more decentralized banking options, more decentralized payment options, things that give them better control of their assets, things that cut out middlemen that are taking fees for not doing anything. So I just think it's still, we're in this world of the technologies in its own way, but I think for the first time I'm seeing a bunch of developments, and we're working on a bunch of developments that are actually going to change that actually have a chance of just making it just the same web, but a better web. So we're super excited about that.
That hypes me up. Josh, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I feel like my answer is going to fall short compared to that, but I'm gonna try. I think that and I also might sound like a broken record, a very old broken record, because I've been saying this. This is the year of privacy on the blockchain. It's this is year of the Linux desktop. It's
Which
kind
is
of
kind of a non-consensus view. So keep pounding
no,
the pavement on that. So
I still believe that to be true, and maybe it's not this year, maybe it's next year. But that said, I believe that the most interesting privacy projects are on Cosmos. That's part of what got me interested in Cosmos as well. And I think that being able to give users choice where they are engaging in applications and then seamlessly transferring assets and information over to other protocols that are designed from the ground up to preserve your privacy or allow selective information disclosure is actually a very, very powerful building block that has been not really explored in other ecosystems, but can be here. And I suspect that you're going to see a lot more of that, especially I'm just going to speak independently of the political environment. I think that we still see that maybe there are key pieces of evidence that suggest that we want to be able to hide financial information more readily, and that's maybe a fundamental right that we all should have to be able to selectively disclose what financial information we want to be publicly visible on these systems, which are generally public by default. So I'm a big believer of that. And then the other piece that Barry also alluded to that I'm also very excited about is this idea that like with a lot of these building blocks, you can actually start to take trust models that you wouldn't normally have in other places and like kind of mix and match them a little bit. So like an example is just a example of a mix and match trust model is just stablecoin issuance on decentralized blockchains, right? Because a stable coin that's a traditional stable coin issuer like a Tether or Circle, you trust them pretty much innately that they have the dollars that they say they do, right? And that's like a kind of binary trust thing. But you can see in the future that there might be other kinds of financial instruments that don't have a kind of 0 or 1 trust boundary that may be newer or more interesting than financial instruments you can get in the traditional financial world. And then when those can start to be integrated in other places, I know that's a bit abstract, but like I'm thinking about things that like might emulate cash flow from various DeFi protocols being bundled together into a new instrument.
And then new Black-Scholes model. There's going to be a new Nobel Prize.
Well, let's get. I mean, you have to talk to Barry about that because he's the hedge fund guy. I'm just the idle dreamer. But I think there's something really potentially powerful and enabling about that. But that's also up to the creativity of the people building against this tech stack, which I think we are going to see more and more of that kind of explored, and I'm very excited for that too.
I think you're totally spot on with that. We could have talked about that kind of all day as well. Just the innovative sort of products that are going to be built on blockchains that weren't really able to be built on Web 2 Rails. Like the first thing comes to mind is Athena's like structured product where it's basically wrapping up a perpetual sort of basis trade and tokenizing that. And there's all sorts of other stuff. And so super cool. And then what you said on the privacy thing is interesting because I know just, I don't know, a week or two ago, the Tornado Cash sort of court case took a really positive turn for Tornado Cash and sort of the privacy community at large. I think with the incoming sort of administration or the current administration now with Trump in charge, I think he's like all about privacy and freedom and economic sort of like just like kind of do what you want. And like he's also been such a victim of overreach by sort of statehood and law enforcement, right? The the Department of Justice and all this kind of stuff. He's probably like, like what was happening to me as a citizen of America, I would never want to happen to anybody. And it was all a fugazi. It was all, we could go on and on. So I think the privacy stuff, you're probably early because that might be one of the last things to turn because those banking laws are just so gosh darn tough. But I think it's going to be like sort of that last pin to fall. And it's like once it's, which is, I think privacy is kind of a fundamental human right. I think we're going to like blow the doors open off DeFi and then privacy DeFi or PriFi or whatever it's going to be called. That's going to be coming up maybe towards the end of his term. But I'm with you. I think you're early on the privacy narrative. But gentlemen, while I have you still,
I'm always early on the privacy narrative. That's my curse.
Early on the privacy narrative for 20 years.
That's right.
Write it on his epithet, right? His tombstone. Early
It's this
on
year,
privacy.
I swear.
This year, it's going to be this year.
I guess my last question, it's something I try to ask everybody who comes on, just because we got a lot of folks who are in the audience who are just learning about crypto, starting to get deeper. What's your one word of advice, one word of wisdom from a crypto OG, somebody who's been in the industry for a while, to somebody who might be just getting their feet wet?
Yeah, for sure. I would say that it is easy to get discouraged or dissuaded or distracted by a lot of new trends. And that happens to anyone that's been through these cycles that seem to get more and more rapid. But my general advice would be, if you have like a deep belief in where the future can go when these systems wind up empowering people, and that you want to build something that's special that can't be built in the existing system, that you should pursue it. And no matter what the naysayers say, and there will be many of them, you have to keep going, because there is a lot of opportunity, and it's way more in my view than the passing fads of like the meme coin stuff and everything else. Like there's something much more enduring to this that will be around. And honestly, like, just stick it out, because that is the hardest thing to do when you go through a cycle and you see the hype and then the implosion and the hype and the implosion, and it can be very discouraging. But ultimately, over time, we gain more and more adoption, newer and more interesting, use cases emerge, and then we get, the bleeding edge gets way, way more interesting as a result. And there's always going to be something worth building here. So just stick it out.
I love it. Stick to your principles, right? Have principles
That's right.
in the first place. Stick
100%.
to them. And even throughout the volatility, it's like, when there's big flush outs, like there have been, in January, a little bit of February, right? There's these big flush outs. It's actually your conviction in an asset that's going to let you put the buy in, right? When things are crashing, you're like, things are down 50%. It should be your principles and your understanding of like why you're invested here, your conviction in that asset that's going to say, okay, this is a good deal, and I might not know. And typically when it's down 50% in a day, it's like, it's always a good time to buy. But I love that. It's a good one, Josh. What about you, Barry? What's your word of advice to all the good citizens of Crypt Nation who are tuning in today?
Yeah. I guess it's just, you can just do stuff, basically. Like, truly. Like, that's the crazy thing about the industry, is it's so nascent and it's so starved for talent. And the demand for crypto products and the demand for new tokens and the need for new infrastructure and the need for new applications is so high, and so many teams in the space are incredibly understaffed. Like, if you just start engaging with people, or you have a skill, whether it's marketing or ops or engineering or finance or honestly anything, like memes, you can get a job in the industry. Honestly,
hey, look at TiVo. TiVo's our producer. He's in the background. He's a meme expert. TiVo, isn't that right?
And it's so new, right? It's so new that you don't need to do something else beforehand. You can just be like, all right, I'm going to do this. And then pretty soon you can become an expert. Like, you can become TiVo meme wizard, like overnight. And that's not possible in like traditional finance. And it's not possible in traditional tech either. It's really like the Wild West in a good way. And that means there's a ton of opportunity. So just do stuff. Folks can reach out to me on Twitter, for example. I don't know if you guys will be able to link my handle, but it's
we always try to link show notes to everybody's Twitter.
400, and like I respond to all the DMs that I get, unless it's someone trying to sell me something. But if it's someone who wants to work on a project, like, I'm there. And same is true of all of the other folks on our team, and many folks throughout the Cosmos ecosystem and other ecosystems too.
Awesome. Barry, could you actually repeat what your Twitter handle was?
Yeah, it's at BP, as in my first two initials, and then IV 400.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, Josh, do you have a handle, or does the foundation or labs have a handle, or anything you guys want to have us put in the show notes there?
So check out my handle on Twitter is a city in Ohio, and then the Interchain handle is Interchain_IO, I believe. But let me triple check to make sure I'm not misremembering.
Perfecto.
Yep. That's the Interchain Foundation handle. And then I think Barry, did you guys convert over to Interchain Labs on Twitter?
I think our handle is still at Skip Protocol.
Okay, at Skip Protocol. Love it.
Will change soon. Yeah, it's still that.
Awesome. Well, those are going to be in the show notes for you guys. Thank you so much for joining us, Barry and Josh and everybody at home. We appreciate you guys tuning in and learning all about Cosmos, the Atom token, and everything going on at the Interchain Labs and Foundation. Come back same time, same place next week. We're going to have some more killer guests. Josh and Barry, take care.
You too, Bryce. Thanks for having us.